Okay, so I wanted to read Plato paper from the Born Eunuchs, The Serpent in the Garden of Sexuality, Plato, because I think it's important for you to understand where we in the church get the idea that, sex is a big no-no, okay? And homosexual activity, ooh, And Plato really, he's the one that really ruined the West, if you will. And so my friend Tony, God rules, and I forget which other channel is, but anyway, this would be good for you as well. Okay, so although Plato is credited by some historians of sexuality as an early proponent and theorist of homosexual activity, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, Plato can be blamed for having first devised the oppressive sexual moral code under which the West has suffered since the early Middle Ages. Admittedly, Plato's dialogues are full of references to homosexuality and to the contemporary male Greek society displayed through his work. Apparently, related love between males is higher than any other form of love. This is clear from the statements of characters in dialogues, but these are mainly characters who do not represent Plato's point of view. All right, so in Plato's dialogues, it's always the case that one of the characters is meant to represent the standpoint of true wisdom, usually Socrates, but in Laws, an anonymous Athenian. And while another conversants range from arrogant fools to eminent men of Athens who nonetheless fall short of Socrates' wisdom, to earnest seekers of wisdom, to gifted disciples of Socrates. Although the character Socrates concedes the supreme status of chaste love between males, any positive statement about homosexual sex at all comes from the less wise conversants, never from Socrates himself. On the contrary, the wise character is confronted with a society in which same-sex sexuality is prevalent and wishes to find ways to discredit it with an aim to abolishing it altogether. This indicates two things. First, that Plato was no advocate of homosexuality. Second, and consequently, the assertions regarding the prevalence of same-sex sexuality among Greeks are based on real facts of life in Greece, not the wishful thinking of some homophile elite. After all, since Plato seeks to abolish non-marital sexuality through his work, why should he pretend that homosexuality was prevalent if it was not so? Such would not make no sense. It would contradict one of Plato's main educational principles: don't show people behaviors in literature that you don't want them to imitate in life. If Plato's work is a treasure trove of positive ancient characterizations of homosexuality, that is only because these positive characterizations were current in his world. They are the starting point from which Plato wishes to lead his followers and his societies into exclusive heterosexuality in marriage. In the Republic, the Laws, and his other works, Plato sought to devise a system of education that would promote what he considers to be qualities of an ideal man: wisdom, justice, temperance, courage. Sexuality was fundamentally dangerous and analytical to his project, and so he said, because it was characterized by mental frenzy as opposed to rationality, Republic 403, and because sexual acts failed to teach courage to one partner, the passive, and temperance to the other, the active, Laws 836, the only justification for sexuality to exist at all was for procreation. Therefore, all sexuality outside of marriage should be forbidden by law, Laws 838-9. If only that were possible, he laments. Laws 835. Getting everyone to agree to this moral code would be difficult, but once it was established, it would perpetuate itself. If only all people could somehow be prevented from ever contradicting or denying it. Law 838. He offers various potential means for establishing the acceptance of such moral code, including telling children at an impressionable age that non-marital sex is hated by God. Law 838. That the abstinence from sex represents a victory even more glorious than any athletic or military victory, and that the failure to be abstinent is ugly and makes you lower than the animals. Laws 840. He also suggests, now you have to understand this is his own opinion, okay? He also suggests requiring that people hide their sexual practice so that the light of some people enjoying sex would not become an enticement to others, Law 841. Finally, one could simply enact a law forbidding all homosexual sex and all sex outside of marriage or concubinage, Law 841. Having concubines, I guess. So this is a Western sexual morality in a nutshell. It should not be surprising that it was first formulated by Plato, since he is undoubtedly the most significant thinker in the Western intellectual history. I say it should not be surprising. Yet it is, because we have all been taught, as Plato suggested should be, that these ideas come from religion and ordained by God. What surprises us is to find that they are not eternal truths revealed through a prophet, but rather the product of faulty, rational thought by an essentially disbelieving man. That should alarm you, okay, you Christians out there. Plato is not a prophet of God. Rather, he suggests a way in which divine myth could and should be manipulated and twisted to achieve rational purposes. Plato's way of thinking spread throughout the Mediterranean world and engulfed the Jewish religion long before Jesus was born. Following Alexander the Great, and you don't think God knew this, okay? You don't think Jesus knew what was going on? He did. Hello. He made everything. Of course he knew. Following Alexander the Great, the conquest of the Middle East, political power was in the hands of people who had been trained in Greek philosophy, in which Plato was the towering figure. This was a period in which several books in the Bible were written. More were being edited, and all were being translated, commented on, interpreted. The interpretations and commentaries were colored by rational philosophy. Whether you want to say that religious scholars adapted the scripture to meet the challenges of the dominant philosophy, or that they were in fact philosophers seeking to use their traditional holy scriptures as foundational myths to achieve some of the aims of moral philosophy. Either way, the impact of philosophy on revealed religion was thorough, profound, and insidious. And it was in this context that the story of Sodom began to be used as a pretext to ban all homosexuality. Hello? What have I been trying to tell you guys? The biblical story of Sodom had traditionally been viewed as a story of God's punishment on a people who exemplified boundless violence and cruelty. It had never been viewed as a story about sex or gender deviance. Then along came a Jewish philosopher called Philo of Alexandria, a man trained in Greek philosophy as well as the Hebrew scriptures. Columbia Encyclopedia calls Philo, who was about 16 years older than Jesus and survived him by about 20 years, the first important thinker to attempt to reconcile biblical religion with Greek philosophy. Philo made the earliest recorded argument that the city of Sodom was destroyed because its acts were unnatural and perverted as opposed to merely a violent and unjust. And he was also the first to associate the prohibitions of Leviticus against lying with males with so-called gender-differentiated homosexuality, in which the bottom partner is a person who is socially defined as not male. See Philo on Abraham 135, 141, Special Laws 324, 325, Special Laws 337 through 42. According to the biblical story told in Genesis 19, the city of Sodom was destroyed after its inhabitants attempted to rape two messengers of God, whom they took for ordinary males. The city of Sodom was populated by men who lusted after men, but that they did not mean that they were distinctly homosexual men. They weren't. The violators were all of the men of the town, from the youngest to the oldest, down to the last one, according to the Bible, not just the small minority of homosexuals that might exist in any town. if there is a doubt that non-homosexual men would desire to rape other men, one can check out statistics of male rape, which shows that the vast majority of rapists of men are otherwise heterosexual. In the bottom of my page, recommended books for references, or one can simply turn to the biblical story of rape committed by the men of Gilbina, as told in Judges 19, in which the men of the town initially ask to rape a man and then are satisfied to rape a woman instead. These men were criminals, but they were not homosexual. Most so-called heterosexual men can be naturally aroused for a homosexual act and carry it out, as well as homosexuals. Although there was nothing unusual or unnatural about their desire to use men as sex objects, it is nonetheless true that to act on those desires by penetrating other males was considered criminal by the ancient world. The fact that they wanted not merely to penetrate males, but in fact to rape them, only further emphasizes the criminal nature of their intended acts. But other verses in the Bible state that the penetration of males is a crime in and of itself. Leviticus 18:22, 20, and 13. All right? In order to interpret the story of Sodom and the prohibition of Leviticus properly, one must know that the attribute of maleness in the ancient world entailed a certain responsiveness towards the female sex and was not considered an anatomical characteristic alone. The maleness was the attribute of those who played the male role in procreation, the kind of man whom by nature showed no sexual arousal with females, like a gay man today, was not considered male, but rather a natural eunuch. So, the sin of Sodom, being defined as the sexual abuse of males, is a sexual crime comprised of one of the extremely rare form of homosexuality, the penetration of a non-gay man. It is not sex between women. It is not sex between homosexual men. It's not even sex between straight and homosexual men when the straight man is on top. It is only when a potentially heterosexual active man is penetrated that there is even a question of sodomy. Thus, sodomy comprises only a very small portion of the entire range of what was called homosexual activities. When you present this interpretation of a story to many religious believers and argue that most forms of homosexuality are not prohibited, that only one rare form of it is, they often abandon the story of Sodom, at that point preferring to claim that, after all, sex outside of marriage is prohibited, and noting that marriage is the only contractable between a man and a woman. In this way, these religious believers only show themselves to be good Platonists. Okay? They will not find the doctrine of no sex outside of marriage stated anywhere in the Bible or Quran, not counting the epistles of Paul, who was trained in Greek philosophy like Philo. However, though constant and unwavering repetition by religious leaders, it has become an axiom that is accepted and never contradicted. Just as Plato had recommended, it is an example of what is called in the Quran saying something is from God while it's not from God. I'm going to stop right here and continue. Good stuff, huh?